Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lore You Know. Today, we are talking about it's going to be kind of a conglomeration day. We are smooshing southeast Ghelspad into a single episode because a lot of that area we covered, but there's like all these little bits, and they don't really have enough information to be their own show. But they are interesting bits that we thought you needed to know. So, we're
I'd
here
done the
today to
research
do
on it
that.
when we. I
Right.
was prepared.
And if we research it, you're gonna find out about it.
Yeah, no, I
But
did this research like before we recorded the last episode, which was like weeks ago. And I haven't looked at it since. So I'm hoping that I'm not completely like, why did I write this down?
right. Before I forget, sharing a link now. Head over to Found Familiar Coffee. Use WH Pubs as your coupon code for 10% off. They are an amazing coffee company. I'm actually drinking my last cup of Hex right now, so I have to order more.
In your
So,
murder mug.
in my, yeah, red rum.
For you, it's like mirrored, so
Is it
it
mirrored?
reads
I'll
murder,
fix
doesn't
that.
it? It's
Yeah.
not mirrored. No, it's not mirrored. For me, it's not. Anyway.
Oh, it's it's
For
it's
you, I
uh
assume it's.
it's from The Shining. Red
Yeah, yeah.
rum. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm old enough to know The Shining.
Right.
Okay.
So where, Sarah, do you want to start? We've got so
I
many
so last
places.
last episode which was last season? Is this the season premiere? We had this
Nah,
gap and I was like, we
now
could call it the
yeah,
season. I
we're
don't know. Do we
still
want to do
we're
that?
still
Yeah,
talking
whatever. We're still
Scarland,
talking
so
Ghelspad, so yeah. So last time we talked about Vesh. And I alluded to a bunch of locations in Vesh and around Vesh. So I'm gonna start there. Because I wanna finish talking about what I alluded to. So let's start with the Hornswythe River, which is a thing I can never. Another Sarah doesn't know how to pronounce anything in the Scarredlands. This goes right up there near that in my kind of probably top 10 list. We're gonna cover two of those locations today. And the first one is the Hornswythe, which I guess Horns Hornswysthe. It's the what Swathe. Wait, sounds like anyway, I don't know, Smith or something. It's just kind of a bit of a tongue tangle. It is considered the mightiest river in Ghelspad. So it's Gelspad's Mississippi if you live in the United States. And I guess it's the Danube for those of you in France. Um, I probably got that wrong. um, now somebody in France is gonna be like, no. um, Anyway, Midas River and Ghelspad forming important trade routes to the east. It's very heavily traversed. So connecting Mansk all the way to the Blood Sea. So Mansk comes out of the Blood Basin. It actually flows from the Kelder Mountains through Bridge City, like kind of goes under Bridge City. There's mention of it in Bridge City. Bridge City's built up in the mountains, so and they get their water from that end of the Hornswythe, goes through there into Blood Basin. And it used to be that Blood Basin was this like little depression. It wasn't even barely a lake until um, the gods scooped up a giant granite boulder out of it and wrapped it to Kadum and threw him in the ocean. And then it became a big area which filled with rainwater and became Blood Basin and filled with water from the Hornswythe. So Hornswythe continues into that, and this end was not renamed. You know, technically could be considered two separate rivers because of the lake in the middle, but isn't. Fills Blood Basin and then comes down past Max, past Mulletstown, through Lave, and then out into the Blood Sea. So, like, what's the big deal about this river? It theoretically creates the border of Eastern Vesh from kind of the rest of that area of Ghelspad. But what's interesting about it, beyond just a general trade route, is that every once in a while it goes backward. At least the southern half of it. Actually, maybe more than southern half. It goes backward, which is fucked up. Um, we talked several times about the blood monsoons of the recent past in terms of scarred lands. When those blood monsoons happen, and on other random occasions when stuff happens, the Hornswythe flows backwards, and water from the Blood Sea will flow upriver all the way to Blood Basin, which is why it's called Blood Basin. Because originally, rainwater, water from the mountains, you wouldn't think it would be Blood Basin, it would just be basin. But because of the Blood Sea flowing backward, it flows up the southern Hornswythe into the lake and made it all contaminated with Blood Sea cadum yuck. And they renamed it Blood Basin, because, particularly in those times where it flows backwards. And the fifth edition stuff explains this a little bit differently than the old lore, but um, uh, in the old lore, it's like it's always bad around Blood Basin. It's just nasty. The new lore says it's only really nasty when the river goes backward. But the new lore also implies the river goes backwards more frequently, whereas the old lore is like it's like once 50 every 50 years since the Blood Monsoons ended and the Hornswythe. It's like, and then the new lore, it's like whenever it's convenient for the GM. So there you go. There's in AV 50 time frame, there's two references in modules where the Hornswythe flows backwards. In my own campaign setting, I've thus made those events occur at the same time because I didn't want to, because it's supposed to be a big deal when it happens. So I was like, I can't have this big deal happening twice in 1 year. So one happens in the Serpent in the Fold modules, and there's another event in one of the side quests in Vengeance of the Shunned where it goes backwards. Although the Vengeance of the Shunned, it's a side quest, it isn't a major event. It's just sort of like, and the river went backwards, and some people drowned, and it was sad. And I'm like, that's not a major event. That's like like, oh, we have to go kill a monster kind of a thing. Whereas it's actually a major event in well, kind of a major event in Serpent in the Fold. And they explain why in Serpent in the Fold. It happens in that instance. But it is, and that was like because the god said so. But most of the time, it's because Queen Ran, who we will talk about in a future episode, I'm sure, who's this very major power in the Blood Sea, decides to get persnickety and make. She may have been the source of the Blood Monsoons. We don't know for sure, but either way, she has almost that level of power now, if not that level of power now, and can definitely influence those kind of events. Because frequently, when the river goes backwards, it brings monsters with it, and Piscians and other sea, and they're like a race of sea creatures that are bad guys, and various other monsters from the Blood Sea will come up the river and start making things difficult for people. Um, they'll hit Lave before they hit Mullistown, but Lave, if Lave's going to get hit by sea monsters, it's going to be when that happens. So there goes all that. Generally, they don't get much past the mouth, though, and that's because of the Vesh and Vigilance. The Hornswythe Vigil themselves, in fact, it's kind of one of their main gigs is when the river flows backwards, they're there to defend it from monsters that come up it. New lore also talks about some uh, ways that they're trying to prevent. They can't really prevent the river flowing backwards events, but they're trying to prevent the contamination of Blood Basin, further contamination of Blood Basin by creating various dams and architectural wonders to slow this down and prevent that contamination, because that's a main water source of the region, and you don't want it to be gross. It also generates, moving on to like the next location, Blood Basin, generates a lot of nasties in that region. Um, so yeah, so the interesting thing is that the vigil, obviously they're the ones really invested in preventing that backwash happening into Blood Basin. But in the new lore, they talk about having an agreement with Slytherin engineers from the Walled Warren and bringing them in to help with this. And this is touched upon in both the SLPG and in one of the Vengeance of the Shun. That's that same Vengeance of the Shun module, where they're like, we've hired these phenomenal architects who built the Walled Warren. They made a city in a swamp, and so they're pretty good. They managed to make a city that doesn't. So we're coming in, and they know from waterways, they know from building things. So we've brought one in, which is like a big deal because that means Vesh is working with Slytherin, which is like unheard of. against the whole, I talked about last time about, Veshans hate Slytherin, and here's Veshans working with Slytherin. So it's like creating a kind of a peace thing.
Yeah, it's nice.
Like, we're working with the Klingons on Star Trek kind of a thing.
Yeah.
A moment. Or, yeah. or the Romulans, or pick your favorite Star Trek villain. So yeah, that's kind of neat. And yeah, although that's supposed to be like a new thing, a very, very new thing that they're working on, that haven't resolved it, that can certainly be a plot point of like, they're building this dam and come and stop sabotage or whatever you want.
Right.
There. So I talked about how Blood Basin was made. You'll find a lot of, depending on the time, whether it's reversed, whether it's spring or whatnot. There's potentially some nasty critters in that region. Blood moths are one of my favorite as a minor monster.
Yeah.
They're like big. Like, I mean, you think moths like, moth. No, they're like as big as your head. There's like these big moths, and they're white, but then I think they're white, but then they attack you and they become red because they suck the blood out of you. I believe we've talked about them in a previous episode. They're what I think of as Scarred Land's equivalent of the
Sturges.
Sturges, yeah.
Yeah.
I hate Sturges. I hate Sturges, and I don't hate blood moths, and I don't know why, because they're so similar. But there's just something.
Sturges have this like weird mosquito-esqueness to them that
Maybe.
I'm just like, fucking mosquitoes. But the moths are like, oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, here, suck my blood. Oh, that's so cool.
And now it's eating my face.
Right.
Yeah, they just look less creepy. Maybe that's why. I mean, as far as your level 1 party is concerned, they're just as horrible. And they're pretty similar in terms of what they do and how they behave, but they're really common. And there's also another beastie called Drowned Ladies, which is another Scarred Lands beastie. I should have warned you about beasties. I don't know if you could pictures.
I didn't.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, and and also like kind of that area. It frequently snows pink.
Mm-hmm.
Because the water will come up out of the basin or out of this region, and get like pink snow around that area in the wintertime. So depending on the time of the year, it can be quite distasteful.
Yeah, I think it's really neat that because so much of the Scarred Lands is, you're either like this corrupted wasteland or it's okay. And Blood Basin is like this weird amalgamation of the two, because unless there's a blood monsoon, like all these creatures, it's this lush area, all these creatures come in and survive there and thrive there, and everything's great. And then the blood monsoon comes in, warps everything goes crazy. You go in and like get attacked by flocks of psycho chipmunks and stuff, and you just don't want to go there during that time of the year. But then the normal rain will come in and flush that out, and everything goes back.
Blood monsoons are no longer an annual event. They were there in that 30-year chunk of time,
right?
Around AB 60 to AB 100. But so it's been a good. I think the last one was AB 120 or something like that. So it's been a good 30 years since maybe 20 years since there's been a blood monsoon.
Or when the Hornswythe goes backwards, right?
The river still reverses, and as I said, whenever it's convenient for the GM for that to happen. So I imagine that's a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a couple other things, there's a location in the Blood Basin Lake called Blood Spire, and that's interesting. There's a lot of spires in the Scarred Lands in Ghelspad. This one rises. You would think that it would be visible when the lake is low, because it's a kind of thing, but no, it shows up during the monsoons when the lake would be high. So it apparently rises up out of the lake, this spiky pillar of something,
right?
Sure, we don't know. One story claimed it is Cadam's forked tail.
Yeah.
It's not Cadam's forktail. He's
But
chained at the
it's a
bottom of
great
the ocean.
urban legend though, just to be like,
It's
we're gonna go see Adam's tail today.
yeah. He's chained several thousand miles away in the Marianas Trench. It's not his tail, but it could be one of his creatures, certainly. And then the last interesting thing around there is these depressions on the north end of the lake called the Fingers, which are, you know, I've said before about the literal naming conventions here. Were actually Chardoon's fingerprints. I think I mentioned these before, where he dug in and pulled out the rock, and those are left behind. So you can see these little depressions. It's not on. It doesn't show up very well on this map, but some of the other maps, you'll actually see like these like grooves in the hillside there, where he made fingerprints with his when he made himself beyond colossally huge to pull a giant rock out of the middle of the area.
There is this like little blurb, and it doesn't even say anything about her being upset about it until it says the little blurb, but it says that essentially Deneb was like, she got over it, like got over him just like ripping out this chunk of the earth and using it as this. She got over it after like the rains and the river filled it up and it became a lake. She was like, oh, okay, that's all right then.
It's a very Deneb thing to do,
Right?
Don't touch my land. Oh, fine, it's land. It's natural again. Things are going back. It's okay.
Right.
Oh, there's blood in it. Oh, why did you? Yeah, I don't think she's pleased about them throwing Cadam in the ocean. It's caused probably more Titan pollution than any other event in the war. Throwing Cadam in the ocean. Oh dear. All right, moving on. In the middle, Blood Basin sits in the middle of this kind of hilly range called the Kelder Steppes. Don't get this mixed up with the Blood Steppes.
Or the Kelder Mountains.
Or the Kelder Mountains.
You can't say the Kelders and mean this place.
When you say the Kelders, you're usually talking about the mountains. This is the Kelder Steppes. So Blood Basin pretty much sits in the middle of them. Most of the Kelder Steppes is south of Blood Basin and within. And there was some debate in terms of where is northern Vesh.
Mm-hmm.
But it does seem that the Kelder Steppes below Blood Basin are in northern Vesh. But they're still described as a separate territory, and I don't mean that in terms of outside the country. I just mean in terms of a different terrain,
right?
A specific terrain within and beyond the borders of Vesh. Generally, they're pretty nice. Kind of a tranquil area, but lots of stuff happened there historically during the war, and B, as a result of that, nothing on the Blood Steppes. They're not really that dangerous an area, but there's a few hazards to be aware of. So before the Divine War, before any of the shit went down, they weren't really steppes at all. They were these beautiful hilly forests. This wonderful sprawling forest, an old growth forest, so to speak. The massive oak trees. So I think of like California redwoods when they describe this. Just some kind of massive trees, old forest, Denev's sacred forest to boot. And then the shit went down.
Right.
And pretty much every Titan except of course Denev, who was quite upset about this, went through this region and caused havoc. First Churn goes in and as just sort of walks through the region and trees wither because he's Churn.
Right.
It creates that effect of just this plagueness and all the trees get some kind of horrible disease. And then like peed or something and the roots sucked up Churnness and killed trees. Then Gulthaga stomped through it with his mighty hammer. He's the forge, the Titan of the forge, and he goes in and knocks a bunch of trees down. Then Lethena, who's Storm Titan, comes in and brings a bunch of lightning and strikes a bunch of trees down. Mezzos comes in and just sort of lightning bolts, or I don't know, he's the Titan of magic, so he just magics his way, fireballs or whatever, and just messes with things. Thulkas finally goes through this region, and he's the Titan of Fire. So he
Right.
just like whatever was left after all these other Titans had stormed through, he just burns the rest down. um, and the sky is darkened with ash for weeks, and by the time those spires burned down, there was pretty much nothing left but ash and ashy tree stumps, and that's about it. Lots of people died during these various events. Between them, most who'd survived the early events fled the region. So that kind of area of Vesh was pretty much evacuated. A lot of them moved to what became Bridge City. That's just sort of fleeing that direction. That's where they came to. And yeah, but the big question really was, why were they, why this region? Why were they so picky about it? Bellsmith dropped a few hints here that apparently there was some magic about these trees, and they held some magical means of destroying a Titan. And so they just went in there to prevent that from ever happening. Like, I don't know, you could make some kind of giant redwoods. They weren't redwoods, but you know what I mean, like giant spear or something out of one of these trees, and that would be, like a stake in a vampire kind of a thing against a Titan. That was implied. There you go. It's been 150 years, so growth is slowly coming back. Obviously, nothing on that scale, because it takes thousands of years for trees to grow that big, and instead there's just this kind of shitty pine trees, and none of them have that magic that Titan destroying magic. But also, that's pretty close to the Hornswythe, and the Blood Monsoons happen, and that could have contaminated it as well. So any magic in that region that was a threat to the Titans is not a threat anymore.
So there's a chat comment that brings up an interesting point.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of a conundrum. So if it was during the Divine War that this happened, how was Mesos there? Because he was the first to be killed. Huh.
It started before the Divine War.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah. So maybe it's
during the Divine War. Yes, good point. It was not during the Divine War. It was before the Divine War, during the prep to it, because they were already suspicious.
Yeah.
And this was one of the reasons why Deneb was like, "Fuck them. They wrecked my woods."
Right.
Because they talk about this, like, why was Deneb on the side of the gods? And a lot of it was they wrecked my woods.
Yeah.
And this was the woods, or one of the woods they was talking about. So
yeah,
it was most of those were a precursor to the Divine War. I think the only one that actually occurred during the war was Thulkas's. At the end,
and I think
everybody fled. But yes, good question.
Good question.
That is a bit of a Mesos is dead. How could that be possible? Yeah.
And if you haven't seen the episode about the Titans, so much of the Titan, except for Deneb, so much of their reigns, their epochs, was just like wanton destruction, especially Kadum, because he was just Godzilling across everything, ripping up mountains and shit.
But it wasn't really rampant destruction because there was nothing alive yet. He was like
He's the one who was like pushing up the mountains and like ripping everything up, but that's technically Deneb. Like, that's her.
Yeah.
That's my flesh domain over there. Yeah. So like.
Oh, she's never liked Kadum. No.
Right. So like you're not just talking like a few years of her sisters and brothers walking around, smashing her toys. This is like her existence has been this. So there was valid reason that she turned against them.
I shouldn't say she's never liked Kadum, because I believe her and Kadum are Corian's parents.
Right.
I don't think Lisa never liked Kadum. She got together with Kadum at least once. Yeah, he's certainly not one of her favorites. I think the only ones she really had a hate on, like really truly hate, were Churn and Gorak. Because Gorak ate her stuff, and Churn plagued her stuff.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because they talk about Churn or Gorak eating her sacred trees, and he's not listed in the events of the Kelder Steppes. So I'm just like, wouldn't Gorak be high on that list?
Yeah.
Because we know she was pissing him for eating her trees, and he ate verdant moon, but he wasn't described in this lore, so it's kind of. Oh no, like. No, I lie. He's Churn's struck first. Yeah, Gorak is. Yeah, Gorak is. So, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure all of this was almost all of this was pre-war. And Gave Deneb a reason to side with the gods. Yet another reason to side with them. So anyway, other things in that area, there's like most of the time it's relatively peaceful area. There's lots of hunting available. There's these riders of the steppes that run around presumably on horseback. That is a region, while it's in Vesh, it is also the Orc Tribes of the Northern Plains have an interest, and frequently, it's a disputed territory, I would say, a part of it, specifically around, it's not on my map, but specifically around the Scorched Rock, which is just south of Mansk. I'm looking at the other map. And which surprised me that was within the Veshan border. I was like, Scorched Rock is within the Veshan border? Because I always would think of it as it must be north of Blood Basin, right? Because it's in Vesh? Oh, okay. You'd think the Vigilance would do something about this, because these Orc tribes are constantly fighting over it. In fact, depending on which Orc tribe controls it, names it.
Gotcha.
So when it's Scorched Rock, it's being controlled by the Scorched Skull tribe. When it's the Gravel Fist, it's called Gravel Rise. When it's the Thornhide, it's called Ridge of Thorns. So it's like, and I was like, why isn't it just called, Veshan High something? I don't know.
Right.
Veshan Rock.
And map makers are just like stupid orcs because scratching things out, rewriting it.
Veshans would have a completely other name for it, or would concede to call it Gravel Rise, because at least the Gravel Fist tribe are allies.
Yeah.
Because there's three major orc tribes or factions mentioned. And the Gravel Fist are the ones on our side, basically. And they're the ones who run True Drudna, and they're the deemed faction in 5e. So, but it's called Scorched Rock on all the old maps, and it's a cool name. So it's a cooler name than the other two. I think that's why it wins.
Fair enough.
No. And it maps the whole. This place was burned to the ground at one point. So there's that. There's another reference to the Kelder Steppes in the Fighters and Barbarians Player Guide book for 3X. There's a group called the Oaken Furies, which is a tribe that lives in this region. They were historically there hundreds of years before, and their ancestors used to tend this forest when it was magical and happy and beautiful and everything. And when Thulglas burned the forest down, most of the survivors went to Bridge City, as I said before. But a few of them stuck around, very vengeful, very unhappy. And 6 generations later, they are led by Chief Alwis the Tall, and the twins Dovolus and Arida. Does anyone care? And they do this funky thing where, to become leader of this tribe, I thought this was a really cool, neat little thing if you want to play around with this. The leader must walk through a bonfire 3 times.
Not like a pit of coals, but a bonfire.
Like bonfire. Like Daenerys Targaryen, dragon eggs lady.
Right.
And she stands in it. They just have to walk through it. So not quite that dramatic, but pretty close, because you have to do it 3 times. Walk through a bonfire 3 times, and then drink a potion made of the ashes of the trees, because that's all that's left of the old magical trees. And then they have a vision quest dream thing, where they see what the forest was like. Every new member of the tribe has to drink the ash thing and have the vision quest, but the leader has to walk through the bonfire.
Gotcha.
But to even get allowed to walk through the bonfire, you have to fight. Everybody who wants to become leader have to duel it out to earn the honor of getting to walk through a bonfire. These guys are serious.
Right? If you're not serious, don't step up.
Yeah. These are serious. They're mostly humans with a scattering of elves, half elves. Um, and yeah, and they're very single-minded in terms of like this thing we have lost, because when they drink everybody drinks the potion and they all see how beautiful the forest was. But they're just uber druidic kind of people. They're like, we don't use metal, and it's that whole druid thing. And yeah, I think they're kind of neat. That's sort of a neat, funky tradition. So I love these little snippets of various traditions they have in these. Like, here's a thing, play with it. I love these. I've said that before. Okay, am I missing anything about the Kelder Steppes? Anyway, all right. Moving south around Vesh, we also have one of my favorite confusing named places, Ardwin's Tier, or Mountain Tier Loch, or Denev's Aquifer, depending on how you squint.
And you really have to squint to read the old map because it says Den of Aquifer, but is also in a really terrible colored font. It is right here on the map, though.
Yeah, it's this lake. And the big map that I've got behind me just says Ardwin's Tier, which is the main name. And that's presumably the lake. Originally was named Mountain Tier Loch, renamed in 93 AV to Ardwin's Tier. There was a big battle there called the Battle of Twisted Timbers. Ardern of Vesh, he was a vigilant and one of the last nobles of the back when they were a bunch of mini kingdoms. I believe I mentioned him briefly in the Vesh episode. He basically was critical in this major battle. You're gonna ask me who it was against. It was against the Calastian invaders. Back during the whole Calastian build-up thing. When they got, this is about as far north. Oh no, they got a little further north because they also there was a big battle with the Calastians around Antanazu, Canyon of Souls. But this is one of those northern battles. Oh, and still, we're talking over 50 years ago. But he was critical in defending that region and died in the battle. And they decided to give him sort of wouldn't have been called a Viking funeral. That's what we'd call it. Like, they did a funeral pyre, put him in a boat, and put it out into the lake. And it burned for almost a week. Like, they're like, how much wood you put in there, George? Why is it still burning? It should have stopped like after a few hours. It's been 8 days or 7 days. And it was amazing, and everybody's like coming to see it. And by the time it started to go out, there's a whole crowd there because there was like, it's still burning. What's going on? And on the seventh night, as it finally started to go out, the light from the fire flew up in the shape of this fiery phoenix, but sounded like a swan cry, a swan honk. What? I don't. What sound do swans make? I don't know. Sound like geese.
Let's go with cry because it's a swan. It's supposed to sound, more
Majestic.
right as opposed to a goose.
So this swan, this fiery swan flies up, and they're like, it's Ardwin's spirit, and he's been taken up to Tanel's or Madriel's heaven, or whoever it was, Denev's thing, and all of this business. And so it became this like sacred area because of this. And it was like, oh, it's beautiful, and it's also just beautiful lake, one of the very, very few places in Ghelspad that isn't contaminated, where you didn't have to boil the water, pristine water. And it's one of those lakes where you can see the bottom, even though it's like hundreds of feet down, because it's just so beautiful. And 300 feet deep in places, and yet you can almost see the bottom in most areas. Near freezing water from the mountains, from the southern Kelder Mountains. But there's an aquifer near the center of the lake underneath. And the water from that aquifer is supposed to be so pure that it actually is has healing properties. In terms of statistics, it removes all levels of fatigue. In terms of like if you wanted to play around of how it works, so it's not like a cure light, but it is like a coffee spell, I guess. Um, cures fatigue. Um, but but it gets diluted very quickly once it's in the rest of the lake. The whole lake isn't like that, which is interesting. So I guess some of the water from the lake comes from the aquifer, and I guess the rest comes from a mountain runoff that doesn't go through whatever the aquifer is doing to purify the water. So they call that aquifer Denev's aquifer, um, because I guess the assumption is that as part of her sleeping to heal Ghelspad, that's one of the areas she healed.
Yeah.
Yes, because
And I'll actually
she's
bring
supposed
up,
to be
there was a
doing that.
comment in chat that was, I thought this
Yeah,
was two separate lakes because on the map, it is two
it
separate
is
lakes.
separate lakes,
Yeah.
and it does seem like two because there's this little tiny blue lake
Yeah.
there, and I thought forever that Denev's aquifer was this other little blue lake.
Yeah, on
And
the
it's
map,
very
the little
confusing.
blue lake is Ardern's tier, and then the larger one
No,
says,
Ardern's tier is this is
right.
I think this is Ardern's tier,
Yeah.
and
So
the
the,
lore says the aquifer's under the lake.
yeah, it says in the
So
center of it, there's a crack
in the
where
center of
this,
it,
like,
yeah.
yeah. So it's all actually one thing, and the map is wrong.
I go
Which
with the
isn't
map is
surprising.
wrong and the big lake is art because it's confusing otherwise. And I think someone just screwed up on the map
Yeah.
or added that lake later. I have to go look at the original map, although it's on this map, which is based on the original map, so it's probably right. And yeah, that's confusing as all get out, and I completely agree. You know, we're gonna put river. That's where we're gonna put. I'm just kidding. So we're gonna put Bride Lake. No, we're not gonna put Bride Lake. Obviously, that's to be in Bash. But yeah, no, I completely. And I thought that way. And part of me still like wonders if that was what they intended.
Right.
My retcon, I guess, is that Dennis Aquifer is under Ardwin's tier. Because it makes sense, and that's what the lore states.
Right.
The lore is explicit about that. It's only the maps that are confusing. It's only the maps that show this as a separate lake. But there is a map where they show both of those locations, and they have that little separate dot of blue. So I agree. I was totally confused by this forever myself and thought they were two separate lakes. I was like, yeah, it's two separate lakes, right? So I don't know. In Vigilant, we said it's the same place, and we just said, yeah, EK crosses that lake twice actually. Well, one off camera, and the other one there's a scene of him going across the lake. And they refer to it as Ardern's tier. I'm going with that.
Yeah.
In any case. Lots of swans are rumored to nest in the area. Big surprise. And they're considered sacred. And and they say that Ardern's spirit inhabits one of those swans, or because they use the swan symbol in that regard. So there's that. Anyway. And the Vesh renamed the lake after him because it was a big sacrifice, and also because of the big fire thing, and that was cool. And they're like, yes, we're naming the lake after him now because that was awesome. Although presumably in Calastia they still call it Mountain Tier Lock because fuck Vesh. Okay. Moving on. Continuing to head south, we talked about the Morning Marshes in a previous episode, so I'm not going to talk about the Morning Marshes again. And now I'm going to go to the second location that I can't pronounce right. Well, I can't pronounce it right. I'm going to I can't pronounce it right if I say it really slowly. Sorporatra Swamp.
Yeah.
And I jokingly
right.
or as I jokingly call it, Soap Opera Swamp. All the time.
There are bard colleges to the College of Melodrama here.
Yes, the College of Melodrama is found in the Wall Sorporatra Swamp. So, yeah, this is a great nasty, nasty region. I'm actually running Bench of the Shunned once a month with my friends, and they're there right now. They're in the, they're in the Sorporatra Swamp right now, dealing with some hags. And it's been a blast to describe this just wretched location. As with so many spots on the border of the Blood Sea, particularly pretty much everything in this sort of peninsula area east of Corian's Cleft, east of this river here, is just nasty, because
Right.
you've got Morning Marches, the swamp and the woods, and this whole zone was devastated by the Blood Monsoons and went through yuck. And I'd say that the worst of it is this swamp. So, like, the marshes are bad, the swamp is worse. It's so bad that most of the Slytherin don't even live here.
Yeah. They can't because they die.
Except that they can, because they built the Walled Warren. The Walled Warren is in this swamp. It's on the eastern edge, sort of this northeast border between the swamp and the marshes. And I think, and I'm actually, okay. I hope I'm. This is like me committing to actually finishing this book. About a billion years ago, when we did the episode on the Slytherin broods and the Morning Marshes, I was talking about I'm writing a book about Slytherin broods. I finished it yet because I went and did Frostlands of Fenric and a bunch of other books instead. It goes in there like, and someday you'll write the sequel to Vigilant too, right? I'm getting to that. I'm back to working on this book again, on the Slytherin Broods book. And I'm looking at expanding some of the Walled Warren lore as a result of that, as a thing. We'll see what I can get away with. It is for the Sorporatra Vault, so. But a la your book on the Minotaur,
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of doing that with the Slytherin.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is how does the Walled Warren work? And what I'm thinking is, so the Slytherin, we know the Walled Warren was originally made by the Forge Crawler architects, because they're one of the Slytherin broods, Gulthaga's brood, and he's the Titan of like I said, the Forge and building stuff, taught people how to build cities millions of years ago. So the Slytherin of his brood kind of have a natural inclination of it. Presumably they were born either in his forge or where he died, which I want to say was in the Blood Steppes, and his forge is in that southern Kelder Mountain region, in and around this area. But that's not where you find the Forge Crawlers. They show up in one of the Morning Marshes maps as a southern area of the Morning Marshes. So I was thinking, why aren't they in the mountains? Why are they in the marshes? I'm guessing, this is me making an assumption, Gulthaga had these other servitors, mostly giants. And I can imagine the giants going, why are the rats speaking suddenly?
Right.
It's like the rats are nomming on his essence or bits or whatever it is that they ate to turn into Slytherin. And the giants are like, why are the rats speaking? Shoo, shoo, shoo. And they kick them out. Like, you, vermin, get out, get out. We need to clean the forge in case Gulthaga returns. And so they left, fleeing east, and eventually reached the Morning Marshes. As the Redeemed, as Slytherin initially were like, yes, bring back the Titans, we love them. And then the Redeemed were like, no, that's a bad idea. Let's not. A bunch of them created a kind of community of a variety of broods and their descendants, and built a city. And the city was initially built as a warren by these Forge Crawler Slytherin, because they figured out a way. And I think they fled south from the Morning Marshes, where all the other broods were, the non-redeemed, the Titan worshippers were like, we beat you up. So like they fled south into the swamp, because the Slytherin wouldn't even go there. Nobody would go there except for like things that could live in poison environment. And they found a way to build a city. Presumably, the walls are part of that way to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to the Walled Warren, though, I suspect is not easy, because this swamp, basically, think swamp gas, but instead of just being kind of methane-y and nasty smelling, is deadly, toxic, poisonous gas.
Right.
You know, your whole terrain is just like winds of deadly, toxic, poisonous gas that's constantly damaging you. And unless you're immune to poison or very resistant to poison, and or have mega magic to help you, you're gonna have problems going through this region, as my PCs are learning as they're wandering through the swamp, constantly making Constitution saving throws and frequently failing them and taking poison damage. So, yeah, that's in that area. And then now in the Walled Warren, you've got all the different broods, almost all the different broods have moved in there and have built up a real solid community. And one of the other things is they're trying to make peace with Vesh, because and with the neighboring areas, well, Durrover and Vesh, because their enemies are the unredeemed Slytherin.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, you can't leave us, we will kill you. So they are dealing with that. They're dealing with the dangers of the swamp. They're dealing with all of that. So they make friends with those who are, friend of enemy. My enemy of my enemy is my friend, and so
right.
trying to make friends with them. So yeah. And Walled Warren's been around for at least 20 years, probably longer. But as it looks, it's still very, very new. And they're known mostly for alchemical reagents, as there's a lot of interesting things you can find in those swamplands.
Yeah.
To make alchemic things. Assassins particularly love this region because there's all sorts of nasty poisons that you can apply and kill people with. So there's definitely members of the Cult of the Ancients in this area trading with alchemists from the Walled Warren to get their hands on some of those alchemical supplies.
Yeah.
And poisons and various nasty.
I do like the entry in the 3rd edition stuff that says that there's a claim that the assassins of the Cult of the Ancients actually bottle the fumes, which is such a great idea, rather than just being like, oh, it's always a liquid that you have to apply to something or whatever, or something you have to ingest or whatever. But the idea of like having, you go and you put this in somebody's like perfume, or like some bottle, and they open it up and they catch a whiff and they're like, oh, that was
Exactly.
I love that idea.
I love that idea. I just absolutely love it. And of course, this whole region outside the Walled Warren is just full of lots of dangers. Pretty much, as I said, it's Churn's poison from the Morning Marshes combined with the Blood Sea Kadum, combined with just what the terrain was like. And Churn himself, before he died, before he even left for Termana and all this business, kind of poisoned this land, which may have been why they chose to bury him here. It's like, well, it was already Churn contaminated. Can't get any worse, right?
Right.
So he had apparently, according to lore, poisoned this land before he was destroyed. So the lore's a little inconsistent there, but you're gonna find all sorts of nasty plants, slimes, oozes, fungus, aberrations, monstrosities, undead in various places, and apparently sea rat dragons are apparently not immune to poison and love this area. Green dragons would make sense, except there aren't any true dragons, or very, 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 very few true dragons in Ghelspad. I don't say none, but a tiny handful. So, but I'm sure green dragon would do fine in this region should one exist. And basically, when the air gets stagnant and there's no wind, the air is lethal. So yeah, and they call that bottled yuck Churn's breath. Lovely name. Lovely name. Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of the bulk of the Sorporatra Swamp. Sorporatra, and Sorporatra is like sleepy, which doesn't make it sound as nasty as it is.
Right. Sleepy forever. Also known as death.
Yeah. All right, moving southward, where even the redeemed Slytherin don't want to go. In the clutch of blood shadows, the very earth seeps. The trees weep lifeblood to grasp plants beneath. So goes life in the blood rain. Bloodrain Woods. It emerged as new growth shortly after the Vine War and is the most verdant region in Ghelspad. It just everything grows there at a rate that's impossible if it wasn't, magically imbibed with something. Mostly blood rain. What and this is something that actually irritates me. um Bloodrain Woods are supposed to be unique for two properties. A, how fast everything grows, and B, how often it rains blood, which is all the time. Whenever it rains blood anywhere else, I feel that it is taking away from the coolness of the Bloodrain Woods. Because it's like, oh, it's blood. There's blood rain in the festering field, and there's blood rain in the blood basin, and there's blood rain in and GM's just like having it rain blood all over Skarn because that's creepy and it's horror and it's great. And I'm just like, but that takes away from the coolness of the blood rain woods because that's where it's supposed to rain blood, right? If it's not a blood monsoon, it's supposed to happen here. This is where it's raining blood all the time, right, guys? Okay, so that's kind of my pet peeve. That it shouldn't rain blood everywhere, guys. But so it goes. But this place is also known for its crazy fast growth. Used to be a plain stretching along the coast, and then Cadam's deluge came. And apparently it even started when Belsmith pulled his heart out. A bunch of blood went sploosh and splattered, and this is where it landed, even though it's like 1,000 miles away. I guess it was a really big arc. And it splooshed all the way down here. And where it sucked up, apparently a bunch of trees, even though it was a plain, like little stubby trees or something like that, just went woof and grew huge. And everything here is contaminated and nasty. Fruits are poisoned, animals are insane. Lumber used to make buildings from this area, which presumably they got a lot of to make the walled warren, is tainted and can cause madness and murder to those who dwell in buildings made out of it. I would like to think if any Slytherin did use wood from this area that they like purified or blessed it first.
Right? Or in the coming years, the walled warden's going to be an interesting place.
It's been around long enough that I think they would have revealed that by now.
Right.
But you could have definitely a plot of, oh, we decided to expand the walled warren and build this new building. And where'd you get the word Bloodrain Woods? Oh, everybody's murdering everybody now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Obviously known for the typical horrible plant life that they love in D&D, like shambling mounds and tentaculous swamp gobblers, which is a Scarnland specialty, and assassin vines and all of the like. Obviously, or not obviously, but they can definitely be found here. When there's heavy rainstorms, pools of blood form spontaneously. But there's also areas that seem to be protected by magic within when particularly during when blood monsoons take place, that prevent wind but allow water to enter these areas. And they say it's a remnants of a protection spell cast by a priest of Madriel. And that when the blood rain goes through these tiny little areas, it becomes water again as it passes through the shield and becomes potent again, or potable again. And it's not just potable water, but it's also healing water, and it can act like a cure light potion and whatnot. Which I think is funny because cure light potions are red now, so it's like, this is good that it's a clear cure light potion. That means it's not full of blood rain. But yet, so these little areas that are apparently like safe, little tiny safe pockets within the woods, but they only seem to occur during blood monsoons, not just during general blood rain rainfalls. So pretty rare occurrence. from some leftover happy magic. So that's cool. And then toward the very, very edge of the Bloodrain Woods. Did I mention? Did I forget anything?
I was following along on the thing. I didn't see anything that you left out.
Okay. Yeah. Towards the very tip, there's Ashton Legion camp.
Yeah.
Kind of toward where Corian's Cleft occurs. We talked about the Ashton Legionnaires several episodes ago. One of the mercenary groups from Darrakeen. They have a camp here. They were hired by the Calastians to basically make life shitty for Durrover. And this is where they pretty much choke off supplies. As shipping tries to get into Durrover, they have to get through by this encampment on the edge of the peninsula, and they make hell for ships that come through this area. A bunch of Ashton Legionnaires there. Moving in, and we're gonna end this at Durrover today, but next going in through Corian's Cleft. I love these names. I don't know. I think Corian's backside for this one. I don't know if anyone else does. I'm sure Corian doesn't. This was a result of one of the more famous battles from the Divine War. When when Tanel fought Hrunruk and cut his head off, his body stood back up again, and she cut the head off, wandered off with the heads, thinking, "Oh, I've defeated my dad," and then his head stood up again after she left and started running havoc. And then Corian was like, "Ah, crap," and went after to stop that. Oh no, this was actually it's from cutting his head off. I'm a little confused. Well, anyway, Corian fighting Hrunruk. Maybe it's when his head cut off. Maybe it's when he chopped him into tiny bits. I'm not 100% clear to me. He did this giant swing in the way Corian does with a giant sword, and cut Hrunruk and the land. I guess this was when he cut his head off. Cut the land below him so sharp that it created this giant, where this kind of used to be a river through here. Huge gash in the land, which is kind of massive. I mean, I assume some of this was river and it just sort of flattened out, but you think this is, even if you just consider just this part, that's a 300-mile gash in the land. So good on you, Corian. Gods are scary. So yeah, the land should belong to Durrover because that's the country that's there, and that's historically who's owned it. But Calastia has claimed it because they're trying to claim Durrover, because they're a bunch of assholes. And they fight over this region all the time over the last 80 years or so. What's really interesting though, because this was just used to be like mountains, Corian slashed through here, exposed what was in those mountains as a result of this giant cleave. So suddenly, where you'd have to mine in normally, there's just exposed veins of silver and diamonds and mithril and cool stuff in the bedrock, which everybody's like, we want to get that. It's accessible now, except there's all these troops there going, no, you're not going to get that because we're going to kill you because there's a war going on. So and then the Blood Monsoons also make it hard, and all this stuff. So while this wonderful ore was exposed, and it's really hard to it was hard to get over the years. So it's not like they went in and just mined it all out and immediately when it happened. There's still plenty left over 150 years later, just because it's hard to reach. So very adventurous miners could quite well if they could actually get into that region without getting their heads chopped off by things much smaller than Corian. That's probably part of why Calastia is so interested in the region too, because of the resources. So Calastia's been trying to take this area quite some time. I'm gonna skip the rest of my description of Corian's Cleft and get into Durrover because it's all really dependent on that. Durrover, between the mountains, is the official name of this country. It's when I think of Durrover, it's considered highlands. and I can't help but to think Scottish Highlands when it comes to Durrover. And having watched like The Last Kingdom and some of those shows um, that take place in kind of that area of England, I can't, or area of the UK, I should say, not ever Scotland. I can't help but to think of that kind of vibe. So they don't say that Durrover wear kilts and have bagpipes, but I can't help but to picture them having them. they're they're they have very much that kind of Highlander older Highlander tribal mentality, clannish mentality. Um, Durrover is technically a younger nation as Durrover stands today, but it's been around for quite some time. Let me get history of Durrover. Where's my history of Durrover? It's humans migrated here during the Charduni Empire, and it was protected to escape the Charduni, and it was protected from the Charduni by the dwarves pretty much holding up the mountains, keeping the Charduni from going. The non-Charduni dwarves, the Ghelspad native dwarves, and they just kind of protected this region so people could flee from the Charduni here and make a home for themselves. Um, it was sort of split up in a bunch of little districts, and there was uh, these led by thanes, and thane, uh, and eventually this kind of powerful thane, sort of almost like a warlord, gradually defeated a bunch of these other thanes and declared himself king. I am the king of this region. I am the king of what became Durrover. And then the Charduni tried to take this area, and the people there went and helped the dwarves defend the region. And a mountain leader, so it's sort of split up between the people who kind of lived in this lower land and the people who lived in the mountains around it. And the cleft wasn't there yet, so it was, the geography was certainly different back then. So it was sort of two groups: the king in the valley area, and then the rulers and the tribes in the mountains. And they got together to fight off the Charduni because we don't like each other, but we really don't like them. And the dwarves helped, and so it was like three groups fighting off the Charduni. And this mountain leader um, does really well in the battle, and he marries the daughter of a different other thane and became ruler of the mountains area. So now we've got two pretty cohesive groups as a result of like that stuff. And the Divine War happened, and Durrover got really pissed on because again, battles there. Hemrook fought Corian there, and all that business I said about chopping his head off and all that happened there, and um, and then Hemrook's body stands up and wreaks havoc, and his blood gets everywhere, and lots of monsters appear as a result, and it's just pretty awful area for a while, as the case would be. So fighting Titan spawn became a big problem, and they all these monsters showing up. So the King Jadar from the mountains, led troops to aid the lowland area from all these Titan spawn that came. But then the lowlanders and the highlanders started fighting again because of ancient blood feuds they had from decades, centuries before, or decades really, um, and causes all kinds of problems, and everybody really hates each other in this region. So, and so the Highlanders killed the king of the Lowlanders, and his son conquers the city, and kind of takes over the area. Then a priest of Madriel, goddess of the sun and happiness, um, introduced uh, the conquering son um, to the daughter of the conquered guy, and then they got married. They fell in love because Madriel's like, "You want to do this? Let's make some peace happen." Marriage, and they fell in love. They legitimately fell in love and get married. But of course, this was kind of messy because they're like, "No, you can't be the king of the lowlands and the highlands. This is not a thing." But they were like, "Nope, we're gonna do this," and they declared the city of Durrover unified capital of the lowlands and the highlands. And they have a son named Jedrad, whose name is like a portmanteau of both granddads, and to symbolize the unity of the family, and all of that. And then his son, Durred, kind of takes over, and that's closer to the more modern day. Then the Calastians show up, and they're trying to take Iron Tooth Pass in 90 AV, and they're trying to take Durrover, and they've been trying to take Durrover ever since. And eventually Durred II takes over. Blood Monsoon happens, Calastians retreated, he dies, Gerad II takes over, Blood Monsoon ends, Calastians return. Duke Trevik of Lageny is now heading up that army, and he's an even bigger dick than the guy who was leading the Calastian army. And big on pillaging and doing really, really bad things, like committing sexual assault against innocent villagers, which kind of horrible. So King Gerad is killed in 142 AV, and his 14-year-old son Gerad III becomes High King. And 8 years of guerrilla warfare ever since, and that's the state that Durrover is in AV 150, i.e. today. So, 20-year-old, 22-year-old king, brand new, trying to figure it out. And there you go.
I do like that he's grown up with this and has had to like deal with this guerrilla warfare in his own country, and like dealing with those Calastians coming in from Iron Tooth Pass and all of that. And so like it talks about how the priests of Madriel are worried about him because he's kind of cold. He's distant
and
from.
He's cold-blooded because his dad died when he was 14. He's been at war his whole life, and his grandparents and his great-grandparents. Like, this Durrover has always been invaded, since before the Divine War. Not always, but over the last 200 years, they've been dealing with this kind of stuff. And 300 years, when was the Charduni Empire? So this is this isn't like the Lydian war colleges, but the Lead had times of peace. Vashtis had times of peace. Durrover hasn't had a moment of peace.
Yeah, the only time they weren't being invaded was during the 14 years of the Blood Monsoon, and that's still not really peace.
They're being invaded by armies. They're being dealt with. They're dealing with monsters and titan spawn and all of that business. So it's just not a happy place. So yeah. But they're considered a major ally of both the dwarves of Boraktorn and Vesh, because both groups have a very, very vested interest in Calastia not taking over this country. So both send Boku resources into this region to make sure that Calastians don't get a bigger foothold than they already have. Yeah. But as I said before, the Calastians pretty much have this place surrounded, because they also have blockaded the end of the river here, that Ashton Legion. So it's tough.
Yeah. And he hasn't, this Jedrad III hasn't had a wife. He hasn't taken a wife yet. And so, as far as the DM side of things for his story, he has no heir. So what happens if he dies? Or what, how does that whole politicking side of things work out when there's suddenly no, if you wanted to kill him off in your campaign, for example, or if, you needed to protect him to make sure that his line continues, or is it better for the country if his line doesn't continue? Who knows? And
he's also mentioned in Murder in the Wild Warren, that short story came out right at the beginning of the 5e era. Vladuin, the infamous Titan Slayer, major protagonist from the Scarlands novels before my Scarlands novel. He goes to the Walled Warren, and he's going there literally to enlist Slytherin to move to Durrover, specifically engineers, and sappers and fighters to come to move to Durrover. It's like, we'll give you a place to live if you help us fight the Calastians and help build our defenses. So, you know, it trickles through there. And he talks about the king sending him. So there's a lot there. I mentioned it briefly. I ended up giving the king a little sister. So I talked about that in Vigilant. There's a drop line about Princess of Durrover, and he doesn't have any kids, so presumably it's his little sister. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Princess of Durrover is his little sister. Officially saying that, but she's any of the lore beyond mention. Either that or Drask is lying, and there's no, or Drask is lying again. I should say. But Drask talks about the Princess of Durrover at one point, which I don't know. I figured she's Strahd the Third's little sister, maybe. First time Sarah has fucked up lore. First time Sarah's retcon lore. All right. Flora and fauna. Lots of hills, kind of stuff you'd expect in hill country. Rugged farms, lands. So think potatoes, oats, fruit trees, and nut trees. Lots of Titan spawn, continuing to make things challenging and difficult as Honor from Rook and Kadum frequent the area. The folk there are described as middling height, whatever that means. What is that? 5'8"? What is middling height? I don't.
Yeah, 5'6", 5'8", sure.
Stocky, leather-toned skin. I feel like they bred with dwarves at some point. Bearded males and dark brown eyes and hair. Women tend to have lighter brown hair and with brown or green eyes. I don't know why the men and women have different colored hair and eyes. That's weird. It's a strange sexual dimorphism. They're considered hardy and even more surly than dwarves. Very patriarchal society as well. And they hold a grudge forever, which is, again, where I kind of got the Scotland vibes. Not that Scottish or... My name is Stewart, okay? I'm Scottish. Forgive me. I can talk about my own ancestry, right? Disparagingly. Okay. Lots of herding, hunting, and lots of soldiering and fighting the Calastian hegemony is kind of their whole culture. Ruled by thanes in local capacities, and then a high king over the whole lot. Major gods are Madriel, and Tanel, and Corian. Although you'd think some people would still be pissed at Corian because of the whole geography problem. Capital city is the city of Durrover. Capital of Durrover is Durrover. That's not confusing. Oh, the Kansas City is not in Kansas? Okay. I love America. Okay. Anyway, capital city. It's constantly under siege. Thank you, Calastia. So it's constantly under repair, which is lots of fun and why they want those Slytherin to come in there and help them fix it. Other known areas. There's several other cities listed, including one that kind of was important because it was on the river, but then the cleft happened and the river moved, so it's like less important. And they actually because the river got so wide and you can fit larger boats up of it. Now there was a little tiny village that was like not important that became important because it basically became a port. So that geography, terrain change really had a big impact on the area. But it's been 100 years. They've kind of figured it out by now. What's kind of the bulk of all of that business? So Durrover, I think they're interesting, and they're mentioned a lot, as I said before, in terms of having just an impact and there's always like, oh, we're going there in terms of what's in that region of like it's safe-ish, like having PCs from that region or whatnot. Like people from Durrover would be fighting Calastia. You've got that whole business, and then, but you still got, like, you could go and join the Veshin Vigil because they've got that alliance, or you could be a Slytherin who lives in Durrover who's come from that area. There's a lot of, or be a dwarf. There's a lot of potential in from Durrover. Not that we don't have enough areas with a lot of potential, but it's basically the last country that we hadn't really touched upon yet. So there you go. Am I missing anything major? She looks at the map.
So they just, I will throw in there that their crime and punishment section for Durrover is interesting. Yeah. Like a lot of the stuff is, I want to say, a little more harsh than other areas. Maybe not Hadrada, but
the military.
Like, so if you have sex out of wedlock and someone finds out, they make you get married. Like, that's just
that is true.
Weird very, for the rest of the country.
Very patriarchal. It's a very patriarchal kind of thing, and that is weird. Okay, I'm not gonna look at the page. I've been bouncing all over the book, so.
Other areas don't necessarily do the whole capital punishment thing. They are definitely about it. If you kill someone, you are killed in return. Treason is a capital offense.
Oh yeah. Or helping the Calastian hegemony.
Yeah. And also this like idea that family for them is so important that if you do a crime like grand theft or something, you're disowned by your family, which is a kind of like exile, but you don't necessarily have to leave the town, but your family's not going to recognize you as a member of them anymore. Just like some of their punishments are kind of unique for the world.
And every this is all coming from the big Ghelspad campaign setting book. Just about every one of these countries has a section on crime and punishment.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, all right, we have a section on culture, that's great. We have a section on flora and fauna. You know, you get a ranger in the party that's relevant. But it's like they expect PCs to commit crimes.
Right.
Like there's always like petty theft. Here's your fine. You know, every single country, it's like that.
Right.
We've one of the projects that we have too many parallel projects, which is part why it's taking me so long to write these books. But one of the projects that we have is updating the Scarlands wiki. A lot of people are involved with that, not just me and Fran, but or I should say mostly Fran. But one of the things I was thinking about doing is like having a whole crime and punishment thing in the wiki, just to compare and contrast the radical differences from all of these locations, where, like, depending on the crime level, like, you know, what country is the worst penalty for petty theft?
Right.
What is the most lenient penalty for petty theft?
And like, you're absolutely right. Like, most, I'm not going to say most PCs, but there are a lot of PCs that are just going to go in and, you know, if their adventure is to go and like fight this person, they're going to just go in and kill them. But that's a law, you know? And so then if you're the kind of DM that wants to then carry out a repercussion of that kind of crime, you know, it's really the depth of how you want your game to go. So it's really awesome to have that included in these lores, that if you go and seduce that person in that tavern, you're gonna have to get married if someone catches you.
Have to get married, which really, like, you know, you're like, so prostitution illegal in Durrover, or something, or these prostitutes just have a lot of spouses. I don't know.
Yeah, they could be a poly.
Polygamy legal in Durrover.
It's not only legal; it's required if you're sleeping around. So
this is one of those laws that I suspect may have been retconned for 5e.
Could be.
Yes.
Like the 5e sections don't really cover nearly as much lore, so
no.
I guess it's really up to you as a DM on how you need that to carry over.
But yeah, that is one of the few, other than Hadrada or the city of Hadrad, that specifies anything about
Yeah.
Sexual relations in their laws. So other than sexual assault, that's mentioned several times, but
Right.
not sex out of wedlock. So that's interesting. I had forgotten that. It's I just think it's funny because the book assumed that every GM is going to need to know the crime and punishment of every fucking city,
Right.
state, country. Like, tell me all these things. No, I don't. I care about crime and punishment. I want maps. I want maps. There's no maps.
Yeah.
There's a few. There's a few maps, but not nearly enough. But yet every one of these countries has a shield thing. Has a what do you call it?
Heraldry.
Heraldry shield. And Durrover's is a double-headed bird on a funky two mountain peak things. I don't know what that is. Presumably the northern and I don't know, the valley and the hill people are merged. I would think. So yeah. So anyway, I liked Durrover. I don't use it nearly enough. It's mostly just alluded to a lot. Oh, Fran's pronunciation of it. And we wrote a little adventure for the Soracine Vault, Maritime Patrol, the Vigilant Training Mission, Maritime Patrol, or oh boy, what a bloody ordeal.
Yeah.
Has a character, Captain Horacio Saltoon. I wish Fran was available to say this. And he talks about, I'm taking the ship to Durrover. And she's got this beautiful accent that she does for him, and whenever now I think of Durrover, it has to be in that voice that she does.
Fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
Saying that. Going to Durrover. We've got cargo. Which good luck getting past that blockade from the Calastians into this. But he's a wily sea captain who can do that, presumably. There we go. And there is a famous city of Madriel, the famous Temple of Madriel in one of the cities. There is a bunch of paladins there as well. Because of Corian's Cleft, it's kind of weirdly sacred to Corian. So a lot of Corian worship there. And there are several forts there as well, because to fight off the Calastians from patients that I only glimpsed about, that I'm reading directly out of the book now. Okay, I'm stretching here. I'm digging into down to the very words. So
we can wrap it up.
Yeah. So everybody's like, yes, a shorter episode. Stop Sarah from babbling. Okay. Yeah. Next time, I think we've pretty much finished 95% of the locations and terrain in Ghelspad, and everything else is persnickety. I was looking at the map earlier, talking to Jeremy, and I was like, well, we didn't cover Murmur Pass. I don't care. I think so. We're going to be moving on to either a different region or getting into more less terrain and less locations and more about organizations. Secrets and Societies is one of the big books.
We're going to do the Blood Sea.
But we're going to do Blood Sea first.
It is a massive terrain area, right? That has affected a very large amount of the world. So going to dive into that finally.
Yeah, because we're overdue on the Blood Sea. We wanted to start this quote season with the Blood Sea, but I realized I still had this last nibbly bit to do. So next time, starting to dig into those Blood Sea regions, definitely. So I've got work to do this week.
Fun stuff. Okay. Well, why don't you tell us all about yourself?
I'm Sarah Stewart. I wrote a book. This one that y'all, if you haven't been watching this show, you know about the book I wrote. Scarlet's novel. You can also find a whole bunch of things I'm working on and have published on Drive-Thru RPG under the Soracine Vault, published by Onyx Path. You can find a listing of everything I've done in that regard on my website, morelikeThisindustries.com, that I run with my wife, Frances Stewart. And And you can find me as well on Mondays on Travis Lake's game, A Family Affair, which is on the Onyx Path channel and Twitch channel, and as well as as his Twitch channel on Plastic Age Plays.
It's true. And I am Jeremy
play
Hochhalter. What's that?
Where I play with you.
Yeah. And I'm Jeremy Hochhalter. You can find me also on Mondays on Travis's channel, Plastic Age Plays. On Wednesdays, currently, this next week might be the last episode. I am on this channel at 2:30 p.m. Yeah, 2:30 p.m. Eastern for Chaz Calendar's Academia Chronicles of Porta Temporia, where we are probably all gonna die this next episode.
Seriously?
We'll see how that goes.
You're
it's
guessing a TPK?
I'm guessing that it's gonna be rough, but we'll see how it goes. And then on for the next few weeks over on the Onyx Path channel, I'm also in a game for Scion, which is a different system. It's the Story Path system. Yeah, and the
that Onyx Path owns.
Yeah.
Not
and
Dungeons and Dragons, but a role playing game.
Yeah, and the system is interesting, but the setting is actually my favorite part of it, because it's like if the gods actually existed, like all of the our own mythology gods, Zeus and all of that, and if you were their children or created by them. So it's a really interesting idea. So come check us out. It's a 9 p.m. Eastern over there. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at WHPubs. What's that?
You could have like Thor's kid hanging out with Bast's kid hanging out with Zeus'
Exactly.
kid.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I'm playing a Native American who's been turned into a werewolf, which is fun. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at WHPubs, here on Twitch at WH Publications, same on Facebook. Follow along and see what I'm coming out with. I also publish stuff on Drive-Thru and what's the other one? DM's Guild.
Still
Go
there.
check them out. Yeah, it's true. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you can join us next Thursday, same time. What's that?
I'm glad we're back, and I hope Thursdays are working for people. But
right?
If Thursday does not work for you, you're probably watching this on YouTube.
Yay, YouTube! Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.